Welcome everybody. I want to show you how I map scout if I'm sitting around the house and got some free time. A lot of times in the middle of the night when I can't sleep, I'm looking at maps. So I want to show you some things I look for, especially early season, archery season. It's hot. I'm going to be looking in Central Florida, maybe touch on some North Florida. I want to look at, well, some things I look at would be identifying oak trees, and you can do that, or I can do that on different apps or Google Maps by the color. So I want to identify oak trees. I'll look at flag ponds or places where there's not heavy tree canopy, where I can see down to the ground or to the grass, and identify trails that way. A lot of times I can see trails going out into ponds, going to beds. I'll look at Y's in creeks, so I'm gonna zoom out. If I'm using my phone, I'm gonna zoom out on the maps and then gradually zoom in, but I want to look for creek strands that make Y's, and then I'll mark them and look at them a little closer. But a deer feel comfortable, a buck will feel comfortable in a Y in a creek a lot of times because he has water on two sides of him, or a lot of times the creek bottoms are open and he can be on the point of that ridge and see down into the creeks, on both sides of him. And then depending on the wind direction, if he has the wind direction coming down the ridge, you couldn't even think about getting close to him. So that's a few things I want to look at. Human access would be another thing, and I don't mean by I'm not gonna try to go 8 miles and scout. I mean, I will, but that's not what I'm saying. I could be 150 yards behind the check station or the main gate. It's just people tend to look for certain things when they're map scouting, so I want to avoid what most people will want to go look at. So like funnels, pinch points, any of that stuff, I want to stay away from it as much as I can. So I'm wanting really low human pressure or contact. I'm wanting feed. I'm wanting bedding, and obviously there's going to be water. So I'm gonna give you a couple examples and show you what I'm looking at, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to Onyx. I've decided I want to look first in Central Florida. So I'm just going to jump up here to a quota management area, not to give away too much information. So I can see there's a lot of oaks, there's a hammock here, there's going to be a lot of cabbage palms. So now I'm going to close out Onyx and jump over to footpath, and then I'm going to look at it really detailed. So you can see there's going to be an old road right there, it looks like. You zoom in, you can see that old road. There's a point here. You can see this over here. Dry spots here. Probably dry spots there. This point. So, and you can tell that's a wet area too. I mean, you can see the open water here. You can see all this is just open water. But that's gonna be a spot I would go look at. And look, I mean, you can even see there's trees there. So I'm gonna go out there and look at it, or at least look around it and see what the buck sign looks like. Because if there's a buck that calls that area home, then there's going to be some big rubs around it. And it would just be a matter of throwing a camera up or a few cameras up and seeing what's going on. So now I looked at those couple places, and the first one, being a finger of pines mixed with oaks, and I'm identifying the trees by the color. So you'll have to just learn how to do that. If you're standing in the woods, pull up your map and you see a tree, look at it on the map and see what color it is. Obviously the cypress are going to be the gray. The dark green will be your bigger oaks, and can also be cabbage palms. A lot of real dark areas are cabbage palms, which when scouting for deer means absolutely nothing. So I want to look early season. Okay, say last year we didn't have an acorn crop at all here local in Florida. We've got the drought going on now. Who knows if we're going to have acorns or not, but I'm going to scout as if we are going to have acorns. So I'm going to identify the oak trees, and I don't want a big oak hammock. That means nothing. Deer feed in the oak hammock at midnight, so that's not doing me any good. I need to identify an oak tree that's dropping where the deer feels safe. So real close to his bed, preferably on some type of point that goes out into the pond, cypress pond, where he's basically surrounded by water, or even an island. If you can look up and if you can find an island and be able to get in there and hunt it without spooking them, that's the tricky part. If you can be able to get in there and hunt it without spooking them, then you're on to something. But hunting islands early season is borderline impossible unless you can get in there right at daylight without spooking something and hunt till 9 o'clock when the wind changes. 8:15, 9 o'clock, when the wind shifts and starts swirling, you need to be going or you're blowing everything out. When I'm hunting the points, if I can access, say it's a big ridge, funnels down, narrows down into a point out into a cypress pond, and it's all surrounded by pond. Well, the deer are laying out on little hills in the pond, little basically dry places at the base of trees. So they're going to get up often, every few hours, and feed somewhere, whether they're out in the water eating pondweed, which is a good chance, or they come up and eat some acorns at, say 9 o'clock in the morning. But if you can get a decent wind, or no wind at all, basically, and let the thermals pull your scent out, then you got a chance getting on one of them points out in the ponds. But that's what I look for. I want to see oaks or feeding close to where deer is going to feel safe. So basically the closest oak tree to water, or to water in a pond. Deer use the water because a lot of predators aren't just out, say a coyote for instance, he's not out there swimming around. So that eliminates some predators for the deer. And as far as human predators, a lot of times in them cypress ponds, they can see for a long ways in the direction they're facing. They can see, they can hear in the water. So they just feel safe. A deer lay in a palmetto patch in the shade, and you may have 2,000 acres of palmettos and there could be, 6 nice bucks laying out there. But if all the terrain is the same, it's hard to identify where the buck's going to be. So those are the places I kind of overlook. I might know, or I might throw a cell camera on it and know, oh yeah, there's a couple nice bucks over there. But that's not where I'm going to go hunt them, because then it just becomes a waiting game to where I put in so many hours and then I finally kill the deer, and that's not what I'm going for. I want to have a target, not necessarily a certain deer, but I want to have a target in mind, and I want to move in on a hunt and hopefully one sit and come out with a deer and move on. So when I'm looking at trails, if I can see trails, especially flag ponds are fairly easy to see trails in. Open, a lot of cypress a lot of cypress ponds have the open edges with the brown grass, and you can see trails coming and going. A lot of times there's like sogs or bogs, depending on where you're at. A lot of them in North Florida where they burn, and they got to burn too hot and they'll kill off some of the pine trees. So it really opens the canopy up and you can see, and you'll be able to see the trails running through there. But I don't want to look for the big beat down main deer trail. I'm looking for a little small trail, or maybe 2 trails that run out to a tree, and you'll see, if you're looking at the map, you'll see a treetop, and at the base of that treetop there'll be a little dry spot, or a big dry spot, but there'll be a place for a deer to lay, and you can see the trails going out there to that tree in the water. So if I can locate 30, 40, 50 places that I think where there's some beds, then I'm gonna go put boots on the ground and to see what kind of sign I see. If there's, I want to look for historical rubs, old rubs, big rubs, and that just lets you know. And I'm not talking about rubs out on a oak hammock either. I'm talking about rubs down in a pond, or rubs on a point where there's no reason a deer would be traveling through there. I'm not talking about pinch points and funnels and all that. There should be no other reason a deer would be there other than he feels safe and he's close to his bed. There's nothing there. So I want to identify rubs in that area, and that just automatically tells me, unless something's changed, like they've burnt or clear cut or did something. Well, even a burn doesn't mean a whole lot, but unless something with the terrain has drastically changed, bucks feel safe right there for some reason if you can find a bunch of rubs isolated in a little area where there's no reason for a deer to be there other than he feels safe. And that's where I want to be. But I'll keep in mind he may be there because the wind it doesn't matter the wind direction. A lot of times how these points and bottoms and stuff lay out, that wind swirling in there, and he's there because the wind comes to him from every direction. So it may be he's there because nobody can hunt him or nobody can kill him, and then that means I can't either. So I kind of want to know why he's there. I don't want to go in and blow him out of his bed and do all that if I can help from it. If I'm not 100% sure he's there, if I hang a camera on it, that might be the first step. Is I get in there and maybe I can see some buck tracks, or I just see the old rubs. I don't want to go any farther. Throw a camera on it, see what kind of deer's using the area, and if I'm not getting him every day in the daylight, or pretty much every day in the daylight, I've got it wrong. Move on. I don't want any nighttime pictures from these spots. I want to be where they're hanging out in the daylight. So if I'm getting pictures at 9 o'clock at night, that means absolutely nothing to me. I don't want to be there. So I'm gonna move on and find the next best area based on the map and hope he's there. Try to find him. Try to move in closer to his bed. I hope what I've talked about can help somebody. And if you're thinking of a place like, a point going out into a pond where there's a buck already, maybe you got a camera there, you're planning on hunting it, I just keep in mind, use the terrain to my advantage. If there's real thick palmettos, down tree, any reason, a deer he's going to take the path of least resistance when he's close to his bed and he feels safe. He's not going to go walking to the nastiest, thickest area, whereas he might if he was really spooky. So if he's close to his bed and he feels safe, and I'm looking for a tree stand set up, or even a setup on the ground, I'm looking for a setup. I'm going to look at those things and say, when I go in, I'll go in and hang a camera. I'm gonna go in and hang a camera on a point that runs out into a pond. Well, it's all open up on top of the ridge, scattered oaks, a lot of oaks. I can't just identify one tree that's going to be dropping and this is where I'm going to sit. He could come out to one of 25 trees that's going to be dropping. So when I hang the camera, I'd want to pinch him down. I want to put the camera where he's going to be pinched down and just naturally want to walk by it. And sometimes that might mean taking an old dead tree limb, and leaning it against a tree here and leaning another one against a tree here, just to eliminate a couple little trails that he could miss the camera on. I want him to walk in front of the camera. So that's another thing I'll do. A lot of times I'll hang the camera up high, especially if it's close to where I think he's bedded. I don't want him to see the camera. A lot of bucks, and I see it every year, especially an older deer. If he ever locks eyes with the camera, he's walking by and you see him just looking at the camera, you won't ever get another picture of him there. And he may still come through there, but he's not walking in front of that camera. A lot of this I've talked about is kind of basic entry level hunting stuff, and that's what I'm going for. One other thing is if I'm going, I've identified a place I want to go look at on the map. So I go in and there's a ladder stand 150 yards away that I could tell was hunted last year, or there's ribbon lines going in, whatever. I'm basically going to ride it off, unless, if it's a ladder stand, a lot of times it's gun season, not for archery season, so I still may throw a camera up, and if I'm getting a buck or bucks daylight regular, then I'll archery hunt it. So when I'm looking at a new area, a lot of times I'll use Onyx and have a big area I'm looking at, and gradually, one of the things I'll look for is Y's in creek strands, obvious green spots out in gray cypress ponds. But on Onyx, I'm basically just looking at the terrain because it shows the roads and all that stuff. So I'm looking at the terrain from a large piece of terrain. I'm looking at a bunch of acreage, and then I identify, there might be something here. So then I'm going to jump over to the Footpath app, and that's just a hiking app. I've been using it for a long time, but it has for the phone, it has a real crystal clear map to where you can identify you can really see the tree colors and identify trees. So I'm going to use that, and And I'll show an example. If you're looking at, if I'm looking at a lot of cypress pine and I see a light green tree out in a cypress pine, I can or maybe there's 2 or 3 trees. That'll be a spot I'm going to go look, because there's probably a dry place at the base of that tree, and that'll be a big pine most of the time, because when they go in and clear cut or cut the timber off of it, they're not going out into the cypress pine to cut the single or very few pine trees. So the pine trees that actually do get to grow out in the cypress pine a lot of times will be real big pine trees. Another thing I'm going to look at on Onyx is, like, I just jumped up to Northwest Florida. A lot of y'all probably know this management area, but you can see the topo lines here. So in an area where there's graded roads, or at least dirt roads where you can see a track, the bucks, for whatever reason, cross the roads on these topo lines a lot of times. So that's easy scouting. You can do that lazily. If you got good roads where you can see dirt, you can run out there and in your truck and just look at the road. You can see that's a good dirt road. It might be lime rocks, you can't see a track, but on a dirt road you can see the buck track, and at least identify there's a buck in the area. And I'll do that a lot of times. I actually killed my best archery buck by doing that. I hope this has been helpful in some way to somebody. Y'all like and subscribe to the channel, and as I can, I've got a bunch of ideas for these type videos during the off season, and we'll get some boots on the ground and actually identify beds. We'll be doing a lot of different things, so just subscribe, stay tuned. Thank you all for watching, and happy scouting.